Hi, everybody, and welcome to Did You Eat? Unspoken Ways Love Shows Up in Asian Communities. I'm Christine Chung. I'm the Marketing and Communications Coordinator, and I'm so excited to be welcoming you all this evening. Since March of 2020, the James Beard Foundation has been hosting industry support webinars and virtual events like this one to help navigate the challenges of COVID-19, provide resources for the hospitality industry, and to better stay connected throughout these difficult times. Before I introduce our moderator and panelists, here's some quick housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded. We'll post a link to the recording on openforgood.com after the program wraps. If you have questions for the panelists, please write them using the webinar toolbar. We'll try to address a few questions as time allows. If you're having technical difficulties, just message us using the webinar toolbar and we'll do what we can to troubleshoot. And I'll be keeping an eye out and we'll be happy to assist. Now, I am so excited to introduce all the wonderful folks on today's panel, starting with our moderators. Ben Han and Arnold Byun from With Warm Welcome, a New York and Los Angeles-based community organization and podcast that amplifies Asian American voices and championing the culinary community. Arnold Byun, an NYU hospitality alum, is the founder of With Warm Welcome. His purpose and passion is rooted in amplifying Asian American chefs and restaurateurs via storytelling, event activations, and creative endeavors such as podcasts, pop-ups, and products. His most recent project, Nemo, empowers rising Korean American chefs via creative collaborations that celebrate and explore Korean cuisine and culture from a contemporary perspective. Ben Han is the creator behind Stuff Ben Eats on Instagram. On the regular, you'll see him featured on various lists on food media as a must-follow account for foodies and food lovers. Ben's ties and experience growing up firsthand in a restaurant family has enabled him to connect and cultivate meaningful and lasting relationships with restaurant owners and chefs. Now for our panelists, I'm so excited to introduce Chef Irene Lee. Chef Irene and her siblings built Mei Mei Restaurant into a must-visit destination for Chinese American cuisine in Boston. She is a many-time semi-finalist and nominee for the Rising Star Chef of the Year James Beard Award. Since COVID hit, Irene has launched Unsung Restaurants, a campaign to raise money for under-the-radar mom and pop and immigrant-owned businesses. She's partnered with Off Their Plate to lead a grocery program for hospital workers and continue to drive Mei Mei in whatever direction best serves her community. She is also the program manager for the Restaurant Resiliency Initiative at Commonwealth Kitchen, an organization that envisions a just, equitable, and sustainable food economy in which everyone can participate and prosper. Next are the ladies and the co-founders of Heart of Dinner, an organization combating food insecurity and isolation within New York City's elderly Asian American community. Moonlynn Tsai is a first-generation Taiwanese American chef and restaurateur. After starting her career on the West Coast, she moved to New York City in 2018 to invigorate the newer, larger version of Kopitiam. I'm sorry if I butchered that. Which was met with much critical acclaim. Yin Chang is the other co-founder of Heart of Dinner. She's also a storyteller, actor, and the founder-creator of 88 Cups of Tea, an online platform and podcast for writers looking for guidance and inspiration. As an actor, Yin has starred in films such as Disney's Prom, The Bling Ring, and is most recognized for her role in the beloved teen drama Gossip Girl. As a short film producer and director-writer, Yin's work has gathered over 13 million views. Now that I've introduced all of our wonderful panelists and moderators, I am so excited to turn it to Arnold and Ben to get this webinar started.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so
That
much,
was awesome.
Christine. Yeah, you should have.
Yeah, you should have a podcast. We should talk after this. That was a great introduction.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Han, and I'd like to start by saying, for many Asian communities, food represents more than just nourishment. Labor-intensive dishes are crafted at the hands of family, caregivers, and neighbors, often as an unspoken way to show love and care. These beloved dishes and cuisines have become staples in American food culture, yet the sentiments behind them are often forgotten, overlooked, and appropriated. Tonight, I am honored to be here on behalf of the James Beard Foundation, along with these incredible guests and my good friend Arnold, to discuss the significance of Asian food and returning the love to the folks who have always provided for us. So without further ado, I'd like to ask each of our lovely guests, did you eat? Irene, let's start with you.
I did eat. I had sushi for dinner, and I had some friends over who I hadn't seen in so long, and so my heart and my belly are both very full.
Awesome. Moonlynn, Irene? Moonlynn Yen?
Yes, I actually just ate and stuffed my face with a pineapple bun with roast pork inside. I was worried I had pork in my teeth right before we started talking. And you,
yeah, I just had like some
wrap.
granola and oat milk. It's been a long
So
day.
exciting.
We were like just trying to get pieces of food in, but probably feast after. Yes.
What about you, Arnold? I love you too. So what did you eat?
You know, Ben, I love you too. Thank you so much for asking me. I am doing very well. I had breakfast at Destroyer. For anyone tuning in California on the West Coast. And I also actually finally had Howlin' Ray's for lunch. It was a very impromptu lunch, but that's what I had so far. And it's still only 4 p.m. now, so maybe this conversation will spark some inspiration for dinner. I guess we'll find out. Stay tuned.
Ben,
no.
What about you? What did you eat?
I ate at 3 o'clock. I had a banh mi from a local Vietnamese shop nearby, and I'm gonna eat after this. But thank you for asking. So let's begin by, I want to address this to everyone. Asian cultures have been mislabeled and depicted as cold and emotionless, when in actuality, love is often shown in different ways that aren't normal to the Western eye. For example, my parents never hugged me or showed me any form of physical affection. Instead, they showed their love by asking me if I ate, had food in the fridge, and if I was wearing a jacket when it was cold outside. So my question to all of you is, what are some of the ways your peers, family, and community have shown love to you, and have these actions affected your work and personal life? Irene, let's start with you again.
Well, when I was thinking about this webinar, it prompted me to remember some memories of my dad, who passed away in 2015, who had Alzheimer's disease. But I remember when I was little, he would cook eggs for me every morning. And then he would like shout up the stairs that the eggs were ready. And I think I started out only eating scrambled eggs. And then he like gradually got me into like, okay, like over easy and then sunny side up. And I always think of that, that like he was trying to, I don't know, teach me something, to like broaden my horizons, even on the scale of an egg for breakfast. And so I think that one of the ways that I feel like, especially in food, the way that we show love and give attention to our peers is to bring people new experiences. So to bring them to a restaurant that they've never been to before, to show them an ingredient that maybe they've never cooked with before. I always feel like that is one of the real treats in life, when I can say like, oh my gosh, like you haven't been to Cafe Sushi? Like I'm gonna take you there and it's gonna be amazing. Like that is, I think, an act of real love in my community and among my friends and family.
Awesome. What about you, Moonlynn?
I feel like, well, I remember going to Taiwan, and my grandma's Hakka, and I was fluent in Hakka when I was a lot younger, but when I grew older, there was a big language barrier because I lost all that. And so we communicated by, like broken Mandarin, but she would wake up every morning at 6, 7 in the morning, go across the street to the open air market, buy enough ingredients to make 6 or 7 courses for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that was every single day. And that familial warmth through food, it's translated over to now where even working in hospitality, I feel like our friends show care by making home cooked meals, like taking that extra time, even though we all have restaurants, but going home, making a pot of soup, distributing it, checking in on friends. So it's like the small gestures through that I think we picked up from our family and passing it on. And it's been a very comforting feel through this time, especially.
Yeah, and I'm not personally in the food industry myself, but
You kind
I
of
hear, yeah, I hear so much about the terminology of intuitive service, and I feel like just hearing about you all talking about how you all were raised with food. I feel like our culture, we're the OGs of intuitive service when you think about it. It's all about the details. It's all about the unspoken words and requests, but leading back to the question that you're asking, and Irene, I have such a similar story with you that my dad would make me eggs, and I never liked eggs until my dad made it for me. And he's like, oh, these like thinking like, oh, these American kids, she only likes cheese, which is so true. So then he would whip up the eggs and beat it with a lot of cheddar cheese, like half the amount of cheddar cheese. It was so good, and it would just ooze out. And he would make sure, even though he was so stressed and anxious that he would be late for work, his way of showing love to me was waiting to the very last minute till he was really, really having to leave for work so that the egg dish with the cheese was nice and fresh and hot for me right before I rolled out of bed to go to school. So that was his way of showing love, because he doesn't say I love you, to me at least. To my baby sisters, yes, but to me it's a little harder. But it's definitely through food, and always saying you take the last piece.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's funny that you guys talk about that. Thinking back to my childhood, my mom would ask me if I like something, and I'd say, yeah, I do. And then she would either buy it every single week and until I hated it, or just like continuously order it. Like, for example, at dim sum, she would always order me the meatballs with watercress. And in the beginning, I loved it. And then like she would always order like 3 of them at dim sum. And I was like, I don't want to eat this anymore forever, like ever. So, but that was her way of showing love to me, you know? And it stuck with me. And I think that food is very deep and emotional in that way. And how our Asian families, you know, show care and show love to all of us, right? So thank you all for sharing that. Irene, I have another question for you. Asian foods are typically expected to be cheap and fast, even though many dishes served require much more labor-intensive work than many high-end dishes served in other restaurants. How do we challenge this narrative?
Wow, what a great question. I think that before I move to that question, I just wanted to note that I think cut fruit, like cut and peeled fruit, is a key Asian and Asian American love language. Like my mom is always horrified when she sees me eating a whole apple. Like, nobody cut it and peeled it for you? Like, what's wrong? But to get to your question about Asian cuisine and kind of how Asian cuisines get pigeonholed, there was an incredible article on Eater about how authenticity or reports of authenticity were correlated with how like dirty or dingy or run down a restaurant was suggested to be. And so the dirtier, the more authentic, the better. And like, how messed up is that, right? Because what does it say about what we assume is true or real to Asian people and Asian Americans? Mei Mei is not a traditional Chinese restaurant, and lots of people on Yelp have let us know that because we like serve our eggs with cheese, just like Yin's dad. And so, you know, for us, I think we've tried to really challenge both the idea that Asian food is easily replicated, like the pad thai here is going to taste just like the pad thai there, and the idea that because something is cheaper, it didn't take as much work to make, right? Because, you know, we all see those tiny knife cuts in the fried rice, and it's cheap because somebody is, you know, potentially being exploited in that situation. I think also I love to talk about noodles and pasta because I think there's such an interesting comparison that can be drawn between like a plate of like tiny little tortellini is like $24 at my favorite Italian restaurant. And you know, some of our guests get upset when they get like 4 huge dumplings for $7 and they feel like, oh, I could just go down the street and pay way less for that. And so the way that something that, you know, if an alien came to this planet, they would be like, yeah, pho and ramen and pasta are all the same thing. And so why is it so different when we think about what we want to pay? And I'll say, like, I think all of us are kind of socialized to think this way, and I'm definitely guilty of it too, expecting Chinese food to be inexpensive. And so I've had to challenge a lot of my own assumptions about that. And of course, learning about the actual economics of running a restaurant taught me so much about why things are cheap. And I think increasingly consumers really want to know more about like what's happening behind the curtain and what factors are shaping the experience that they're having in a restaurant. And so I am really hopeful because I think that conversation is happening. And I'll just say quickly, something that I've been working on generating conversation around is how when white chefs start cooking Asian cuisines, it's suddenly okay to charge a lot more for them. And so I really want there to be productive conversation around the idea that white chefs feel entitled to cook any kind of cuisine that they want, and really hoping that that's a conversation that we can keep having.
Yeah, this is something that Arnold and I talk about a lot. How the disparity between, you know, Asian cuisine versus cooked by Asians rather, and you know, non-Asians. There's such a big disparity. And speaking of Italian food, I had some very pricey agnolotti last night, and it was just average. But thinking about the, I'm not gonna say where, but yeah, I mean, you know, and going back to what you do, especially with dumplings, right? There's so much. People think dumplings are easy and they're just like folded and meat wrapped with meat, but there's so much behind it. And I know this firsthand when I was working with Lam Jo leading up to their closure last year. And, you know, she was selling her bag at one time for 50 dumplings for $12. And it was insane. And then towards the end, she had to raise prices because there was just so much demand for it. And I think ultimately she priced it to 16, which is still a steal, right? And I was talking to her today and, you know, trying to bring her back and help her out with some, you know, potential opportunities, but she says she can't find anyone to help her. That's the hard part. She's having a very difficult time. Her staff doesn't want to come back. She's like, I can't do this by myself. So it's just like situations like that are just so challenging. But Arnold, what do you think?
Well, I wanted to take it back to one point you mentioned, Irene, because one of the first times I found out about you was actually, you mentioned Incredible Eater article, but there was an Incredible Eater article that you did, which actually you opened the P&L statement of your restaurant. And if anyone knows, probably everyone in this panel, but maybe some listening as well, it's a hard business to be in. You definitely don't do it for the money, that's for sure, right? So I was just really curious for you when you put out that article and you shared those numbers. It was very detailed, actually. It was a really great read. I had a chance to look at it again, but what were some responses from just people in the community, whether that's industry or non-industry? I'm just so curious.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking about that. It's kind of crazy because we put that article out right before the pandemic hit, and the kind of moral of the story was like, it's really hard to run a restaurant, and like if you think any independent restaurant owner is getting rich, like you're really confused. And then of course we all saw how tenuous our industry's existence was when the pandemic happened. We decided to take our P&L to the public because at Meimei we practiced open book management. So everyone in the company, dishwashers, dumpling folders, sous chefs, servers, they all get an education on how the business finance sort of works and hospitality best practices. And they come to understand like, oh, when I convince a guest to buy this dish, how much of that money is spent on ingredients, and then how much is spent on labor, and then how much does the restaurant actually keep? And so we would meet every month to actually review the numbers, and our staff would be able to read the P&L and be like, oh yeah, like that number's so high because I know we hired a bunch of people, or like, oh, like that number's so low because we catered a crap load of weddings and it pushed down our cost of goods. And so the idea with that is like, if everybody understands what the rules of the game are, then we make a much more effective team. And then we basically just extrapolated that to say, well, what if our diners understood what the rules of the game are? And they could actually help us play more successfully. And so we had already been sharing that information and that data. And so taking it public felt like the natural next step. I got a lot of flack from people, like random people on Facebook. And I loved it because I was like, we never talk about money in specifics in this industry. So like, if you don't agree with my numbers, or you think like I'm crazy to pay X for Y, like you can show me your P&L and we can all talk about it. Of course, nobody took me up on that, right? But I think for a lot of folks in our community locally, we held an event where we presented this and we did a lot of Q&A. I think that people felt like they had seen something they weren't supposed to see, like, you know, behind the curtain or under the hood. And, you know, I always talk about how so many things in a restaurant aren't on the plate. And it makes me nuts when people say, oh, like, look at this plate of food. I could have gone to the grocery store and made this myself for, you know, $2. And like, yeah, that is what restaurants are predicated on. Like the fact that you're not willing to do that, or the fact that you want to eat that plate of food, but you also want to have credit card processing, and you want to have air conditioning, and you want to have a server who's wearing a nice apron, and you want to use a bathroom that's not yours, that has toilet paper in it that you didn't pay for. Because remember, so many things in a restaurant are technically free. You can take as much toilet paper as you want. You don't have to pay for it. We won't charge you. You could probably take some home in your purse, you know, if it's the pandemic and supplies are running low. But the idea that actually the money you pay is so much more than what's on the plate. It's everything that goes into a restaurant experience. That's what I really hoped people took away from our conversation. And I do talk to some people now who are like, oh yeah, like you're the toilet paper lady, because you made that like really important point, but like you kept talking about toilet paper. And I'm like, yes, I'm so glad I made the right impression. So I hope that it's memorable and that people feel like they're getting a perspective on something that is maybe really familiar to them. They go out to eat all the time, but they don't actually know quite how it works.
We should put a price tag on every single thing. Like this little square of toilet paper is 5 cents.
That's so funny you say that. We did an activity internally where we put price tags on a lot of our products in the restaurant, so that, you know, like if a cook drops the roll of plastic wrap down the stairs and all the plastic wrap like, gets undone and it gets ruined, you know, there would be a little price tag that says like, you know, this box of plastic wrap costs $15, and like that's enough for you to buy a Supreme Peppa Pig collaboration T-shirt. Like little things.
I think just having that awareness and that visualization, it's so important. I mean, people would steal our soaps all the time, like,
Totally. Yeah. And I think, you know, for us having our staff do that work, it was like, oh, like, I'm not the asshole. Like, we just know that things cost this much. And so the fact that like our team was able to really engage with that, and, you know, I don't know how much a Peppa Pig Supreme collaboration T-shirt costs, but they do. Like, that was one of the really cool things. And I think that, I don't know, I don't think competition between restaurants is the problem that a lot of people treat it like it is. I think that we're, you know, if there is an enemy, it's the uneducated diner. And so we all benefit when diners really understand what's going on in restaurants.
Yeah, transparency and education, I think, is how we can all understand each other's industry a little more.
I have to be, in talking about transparency, I have to be very honest and say that I was one of those uneducated diners. And before I started dating Moonlynn, I came from a family, my mom's side is from Malaysia, and they're very like, okay, wow, this is so expensive. We could just head over to Chinatown and just pay a few bucks. Like, why are we wasting our time here? So I grew up with that kind of mentality. And it wasn't till seeing her, and honestly, I was shocked how some customers behave, really, quite frankly. And I couldn't imagine just hearing about how hard back of house works, front of house, all of it has to have a synergy of flow. And yet it's so easy for people to pinpoint and pick out the worst case scenarios. And just you talking about transparency, I'm almost feeling like a split kind of perspective, where there's one where I'm like, oh, if tying back to the conversation about why can't our food made by people who look like us be charged at whatever price we think is fair? I don't want us to have to feel like we have to prove to people, right? Like, I would love to see a white chef be as transparent as you and put that out there, but they don't do it because they know they don't need to. It's like colonizing our food all over again.
Yeah.
But then the other side is the transparency model. The business model is so educational. Not only that, beyond that, it creates empathy, because it took really, again, it had to take me dating her for nearly 7 years. And I was like, wow, oh my God, like, gosh, people need to be nicer to y'all. Like, this is ridiculous. But at the same time, silver lining with this pandemic is the gateway for people to understand how much this industry has been pummeled. And truly, it's such a it's like you said, that the very thin threshold of margin of profit is barely there. And only people started to finally understand that. And me seeing people from my acting industry, from the literary world industry, finally understanding that conversation and joining it and sharing it in their own Instagram stories and reposting, and we're like, oh my gosh. So truly, it had to take a pandemic to finally allow for people to see and understand your guys' industry. And I have so much respect for you. And I love that you're so transparent about that. So inspiring.
Yeah, I mean, for me too, it made such a big impression because I think I've worked for a lot of different employers, and not a lot of employers are very comfortable sharing how much they're making. And so for me to see that on a public facing article that anyone could just read, it was very refreshing, and I think a sign of what was to come. You know, in the past year, I think the restaurants, as though we know it, has changed and is still changing. I think it's been great for those that are marginalized, especially in the Asian American community, because I've been seeing personally a lot of friends who were sous chefs, you know, really taking this time to do their own project. In fact, I was able to do my own project too out in LA, and I think it wouldn't have happened. Talking about silver linings, kind of, I think that was definitely a big silver lining for our community and for anyone that was working under perhaps a white chef or some, you know, because I've been there, you know, I definitely did the classical French restaurants and the fine dining, but I think it's been really cool to see all of us be able to create some space for ourselves. And I'm so happy that, I think you didn't know it at the time, but you really started the conversation in terms of like, how much does it cost to run a restaurant, right? Because from the outside, you know, it's easy to think, oh, wow, they must be making a lot of money. Like, it's a Friday night and they're packed. No, that's not necessarily the case, right? So it's kind of the opposite.
Yeah.
But I want to bring the conversation a little bit towards Heart of Dinner now too, because just talking about making impressions and empathy, you guys have made such a big impression on me personally, but honestly for just the thousands of homebound elderly in New York and beyond, to be honest. I think it's just been super inspiring to see you guys lead this effort. I mean, I had a chance to really see this grow from, it wasn't even Heart of Dinner at the time. You know, you guys were pushing a different name. I saw the brand change, you know, like I saw it all. So it's just such a cool full circle moment for me to be in this space with the both of you. But the question I wanted to ask is, it seems very intentional in your programming, the way you guys are doing things. And the one thing that I noticed was the partners that you have, right? So Helen from Saigon Social, Michael from Besso, and a few other friends as well that are all Asian American. So was that intentional for you guys to partner up with other Asian American operators, given that you're serving the homebound elderly? Like, what were you thinking about? What kind of food you want to prepare for them and that community? So that was my first question, actually, and then we can tie into some other things.
Thank you so much, Arnold. First of all, thank you for being there since day one.
Yeah, even when it was a food tour,
yes,
right before the pandemic was.
Yeah, but absolutely, our whole ethos and just what we like to say at home all the time is rising tide lifts all boats. And that's a very common phrase that everybody understands. And it's while you are taking care of a community that has very much been in need for a long time, way before the pandemic. And honestly, we found out about this need truly had to take a pandemic yet again. But while you're doing that, why not do it with an entire neighborhood of people that you know and have mentioned that they are kind of in a situation that every other restaurant is, where they are going through a rough time. And I would have to say you, because you're directly in the industry, that was a very intentional, right?
Yeah, so what we were learning were there were homebound elders at home, Asian American elders who their aides weren't able to visit anymore and to prepare the meals, and they were getting governmental help, but these food packages were being sent over that were culturally inappropriate. They were getting canned tuna, and these are ingredients that elders, with arthritis can't even open. And so we're hearing about food wastage, and then also this leading to social isolation and depression amongst the elderly Asian community. And we're like, well, this is an industry we're very comfortable with, and especially through food, what can we do? And so we started cooking culturally thoughtful meals from home initially. And we're like, okay, how can we do more? And at that time, most of the restaurants around us, they were closed. So there was only a handful that were around, and they happened to be our friends that we knew from before the pandemic. So Sam from Golden Diner reached out and was like, hey, I want to be a part of this. What can we do? And then Helen from Saigon Social, Jacqueline, a local baker
From Party Bus
Bake Shop reached out. And I think it's so important to note that at that time, most of these restaurants were hurting themselves. And it was incredible that they were reaching out to donate meals and not even asking for compensation. They just wanted to be able to help
contribute
their elderly as well. So that's how we started. And it was intentional in the sense of we knew we wanted to provide culturally thoughtful meals. And, the younger generation Asian American chefs, they were able to do that. Jacqueline at Party Bus Bake Shop, she isn't Asian. She is married to a Chinese man, but she is so respectful of these ingredients. And so we reached out asking, could you make like the scallion buns for our elders? And tell the story.
She is incredible. She actually felt hesitant at first, thinking like, oh, I don't know if this is my space to do that. Are you all right with that? And we said, well, we are asking you to make it.
Because there were no bakeries in the area that were open at that time.
Exactly. That was very local to us, that we could walk by foot and get everything together, because we had to act very quickly. And we also we didn't own a car as well at that time. And so Jacqueline went through and did so much research over and over and over again. And for the first 3 to 4 trials of hundreds of scallion buns, she refused to accept any compensation for it. And that was part of the deal. We're like, we want to work with you all, but you have to receive some kind of compensation for this. And she's like, I refuse. Like, I need to make sure, I want to hear that your elderly love it. And if it's something that reminds them of home and it's up to their standards, then we'll talk. So it's working with either Asian owned or allies, just like Jacqueline, has been so helpful to us. And also, to clarify the intentional part, there have been actually about half of the restaurant partners we worked with, they reached out to us through Instagram or via text, maybe mutual friends that you knew. And what really gravitated us towards them was their whole heart and reason of wanting to be a part of it. Like Moonlynn was mentioning earlier, that many of them didn't know there was compensation. Like, they just wanted to be a part of it. And we really were seeking those people out, knowing that we were wanting to compensate them. But the point is, your heart should be there. Your intentions and your integrity should be there, because then we know you can last for a long run and sustain as long as we're hoping to sustain. Because if it's the vice versa, you're going to burn out really quickly. And we kind of want to make sure that whoever's involved with Heart of Dinner has the same intentions, has the same values, and shares the same ethos. So yes, very intentional in those ways. And we're so proud of our entire restaurant family. And the girls that we still work with, Party Bus Bake Shop, Saigon Social, and Besso, have been there since day one and still there till this day. And
through 2 pregnancies.
Oh my God, Besso.
Like texting us at the hospital, asking how the meals were. We're like,
yes,
what?
Maiko and Emily. Yeah, like, please take care of your little bun in your oven, please, and make sure they're out safely. And don't worry about
Bun
the
in your
meals.
oven.
They're like, is it okay? Did the staff take care of it? Do the elderly love the food? We're like, it's still delicious. So these are the kinds of people. And every single Wednesday for over a year, same type of quality and integrity caliber since day one of April, all the way back in April of 2020.
Yeah.
2020. Yeah.
Like, wait, what?
2020. There we go.
We all just forgot. Last year's a blur.
Right?
So
It's like, it's
no
melting.
one
Feels like a
needs to
decade. Oh my
remember.
God.
It didn't happen. It's okay. That's incredible, and I just wanted to kind of hark on what you said, Moonlynn, where it's incredible that those in our industry, when we are pushed against the wall, the first thing we think about is the people around us. Like, is she okay? Is he okay? Are they okay? Just thinking about our community. And I think like, and if everyone in this kind of panel right now, I think it's suffice to say that we really do think about others and the well-being of others. And from a community standpoint, Irene, you did the same too. I mean, your concept has changed how many times during this pandemic? So, I mean, how have you adjusted? And also, I think you are definitely putting your community first and foremost as well. So I'd love to hear more about your adjustment from, maybe being a restaurant to now you're just doubling down on dumplings, right? So
Yeah, exactly. Well, the business itself has changed a lot. We decided that we weren't going to reopen Mei as a restaurant, and so we bought a dumpling machine to help us produce, and we are going for a direct-to-consumer model. And I would say in the meantime, we have been able to be part of some really cool emergency feeding projects. Nothing as cool as Heart of Dinner, but
Oh my God, please. Anything you do is cool.
And we're like,
Irene.
dumpling.
Yeah.
Boston is always like a 4 to 7 years behind New York City. So I assume, in time for the next crisis, we'll be there with a project that's that awesome. But I will say, like, I think that during the initial sort of like fear and uncertainty of the pandemic, it's very natural for anyone to feel like, I just need to do something to help. It doesn't matter if it's big or small, like I just have to feel useful or else I don't know how I'm gonna make it through this. And so part of what we did with Mei was to make sure that we were leveraging our access to like the wholesale broadline food system to try to fill in gaps that were happening in retail stores. Like you wait in line at Trader Joe's for an hour and then you get inside and like there's no eggs and there's no pasta. And then I actually, I drive by Trader Joe's on my way to the restaurant every day. I would see the line and I would be like, oh my gosh, like how long have they been there? Do they even have a car? What if they buy a bunch of food and then they can't get it back home? Like just stressing out about seeing those people outside. And then I would get to Mei and my incredible delivery driver from one of my vendors would literally wheel thousands of pounds of food in the door. And so that's just one person coming in contact with one other person, such a low risk of anybody getting sick. And so we figured, we can help our distributors right now and we can help our community and we can get really affordable products. And again, making sure that they are culturally appropriate. So I think we the Maseca market for our Central American community members was really tight for a while because we were buying so much of the stuff. But rice and beans, and then for our Vietnamese and Chinese families, soy sauce and cabbage and tons of jasmine rice, and just feeling like, okay, if there's scarcity here, then like maybe we can find some abundance somewhere else. And so Project Restore Us, which is now run by an incredible team of volunteers, and I have basically nothing to do with it. I was just the only restaurant owner crazy enough to be like, sure, buy all the rice and beans, and like I'm sure we'll raise the money at some point to cover it. But these volunteers are so amazing, and they have raised, through grants and individual donations, over $750,000 since this time roughly last year. And I think probably 90% of that is going straight towards buying food. So we cover some administrative costs, but a lot of the time in like the nonprofit world, they talk about like how fast funds are deployed. So like the deployment rate of this was I don't know, was -100, right? Because we spent the money first and we were like, okay, I guess we'll fundraise it later. But I think there's something so immediate about feeding people. And I think, Moonlynn and Yin can probably speak to this even better than I can. But the feedback that we got from people who received groceries was so incredible. And to know that what was kind of a whim that we came up with had some impact and made people feel like someone was looking out for them, even if it wasn't someone they knew. I think that is about addressing the social isolation that so many people really struggled with during this time. We also had one person who received groceries. Each delivery is about 40 pounds of food. And we had volunteers who were driving these boxes around, and he lives in East Boston, which is a pretty Salvadorian, Guatemalan neighborhood. And this guy is an Amazon delivery driver, but he was sick, and so he couldn't work. And so he was on the list of this community organization. We took food to him, and he texted us, and he texted the community organizer who had connected us, and he said, I have never had a gringo deliver anything to me before. I'm the delivery driver. And so for him to see like some white guy in loafers like bringing up a box of groceries to his door, I mean, there's something about that that just turned everything upside down. And so the idea that we can actually help neighbors help each other and give people those opportunities, I think people are just desperate to get their hands on something and to contribute in some way. And it sounds like, you know, for the restaurant owners who Moonlynn and Yin work with, like they were ready, they were looking for this opportunity for something to do. And I think that is one of the things that certainly in the Asian American community here is such a strong undercurrent, that like everybody has to come out on the other side.
For sure. I mean, I think some phrases that are getting highlighted right now, especially culturally appropriate, is ringing hard with me right now. One of the things that Moonlynn and Yin, that you guys do excellently in talking about volunteers and mobilizing is these bags. Let's talk about these bags that you guys have, because you have volunteers that are doing it in their native languages of the elderly, which is phenomenal, right? And that you have so many volunteers that are willing to give them their time because they see the importance of the work that you do. So talking about feedback from Irene as well, are there some kind of conversations that you guys had recently with elderly that you could share with us in terms of maybe that I know there's a lot of, you know, tear-jerking moments for you guys as you do these deliveries. So I just wanted to kind of hear more about these examples and stories, if it's okay with you.
Yes, absolutely. Do you want to kick
Yeah,
off?
Heart of Dinner, we didn't know it was going to be a nonprofit. It was just our immediate response to the pandemic, and
in response to, just preface this, this is during the time when we were being told on the news that coronavirus was going to likely dissipate in the summer of 2020. And also this is also around the time where we were told we can get coronavirus from touching Amazon boxes. So there was really not much that we knew.
Yeah.
Yes. And so that's why when Moonlynn was saying that we had no idea we were going to turn into a nonprofit, because we thought these issues were going to kind of disappear. We were very, very naive about that. And then you can take it from there.
It's so we ended up dubbing Tuesdays and Wednesdays Crying Tuesdays and Wednesdays, because we would be getting these feedback from our volunteer drivers who had stories to share, and we were actually on the phone for about an hour with an elderly over in Sheepshead Bay, and she called us, and it was just so nice having a full-on conversation, and like her sharing how much it meant to her that it wasn't just the food, but it was that human connection, and that especially being Asian American kids, that we still thought of our elders, which is something that I don't think I really.
Yeah, she was shocked. She's like, how old are you guys? And we told her about our approximate age, and also how old most of the average people have been contributing at the time. Right now it's a huge range from like 4-year-olds to, fellow seniors writing letters to their fellow seniors. And so she was so shocked. She's like, I cannot believe you all still remember our generation, that you kids born here care about us. We cannot believe this. And she actually told us too that she loves saving the brown bags and the handwritten notes that you're asking about, Arnold. She mentioned that that's what she looks forward to every single Wednesday. She cuts it out and saves it each and every week. So she probably has so many by now. There's other elderly of our recipients who say that they will also save the bags and they don't dare throw it out. There's one senior who's so cute. She will save it and return it to us. She'll tell the volunteer driver and say, please don't waste this. No wastage. Please give back and pass it on to another senior, because I know it made me so happy. It will make somebody else very happy to see these drawings as well. So it's made a huge impact for the elderly, but also would love to share that on the other end of it, why we were actually opening this up to the community, to the public, was because when we would do it ourselves, like we had no issues pulling all-nighters, like writing, well, 我们在想你,我们爱你, which means we're thinking of you and we love you. And for example, I like to share this, is I don't know how to really write Chinese at all. I was a really bad kid, and I was a kid who cut Chinese class. My mom's still pissed I wasted her money. And so she's like, so I made, you know, it was embarrassing, but I use Google Translate. And why I like to share this, aside from embarrassing myself, but also because I think it's really important for people to know that you don't need to speak Chinese. You need to have the heart and the care and the thoughtfulness to want to do this for your fellow neighbor, for somebody else that you know may need this kind of uplifting feeling to get through a very isolating time. And so this opening this up to the public, because it felt very healing. Personally for me, there's one time I remember writing one of the first container covers. It wasn't even on letters yet. We were writing on the covers of the to-go containers with black Sharpie markers. And I remember tearing up because I was experiencing racism firsthand, really nasty remarks telling me to go back to where I'm from with a lot of profanity. And it felt very, very dangerous. I actually felt very unsafe. And I was really scared. And we couldn't imagine how our elderly recipients were feeling, especially those who had no choice but to go out of their homes. So when I was writing those notes, for example, while she was cooking actually 200 meals while I was writing, sorry, you're doing all the hard work. I remember tearing up thinking, what an incredible way of expressing our love and to let our recipients know that we love you and we care for you. And we know that already through meals, right? This whole entire conversation tonight is about food being that significant instrument to let them know that we love them. But also beyond that, how do we also add a little bit extra and to be even more forward, to be even more like, I guess you could say like the American kids are so forward, right? Is what my grandpa says. So it's like, okay, let's throw some of that in there and actually be so straightforward and say it to their face, because time is short. There are so many deaths being reported at that time where it's like, if you don't say what you mean, it's so heartbreaking too. And, you know, it's easier for us to express ourselves. So why are we holding ourselves back? Hence why we opened that up to everybody else who had been asking, hey, how can I contribute to Heart of Dinner? How can I help? And people were wanting to do something, but they were scared. Well, everybody's quarantining, so they had to, by mandates, stay at home. So that was an amazing opportunity for people to be a part of this, to feel that healing as well, to feel like their time was being well spent, writing each and every handwritten note. And oh my gosh, the stories that we've heard, it's bonded so many family members, different generations. I remember we were reading, there was a story, there was a DM that we received about this woman in her 40s, was never close with her dad. But this project of writing letters together brought them, it healed their relationship. And however, how many other people too who are not Asian or Asian presenting, they learn so much about our culture just by looking it up, thoughtfully looking up each word and trying to understand where we're coming from. And it's it's bridged so many gaps in that way, which we're really proud of.
Kind of like what Irene was saying, we have delivery drivers who are not of Asian descent, but now they're best buddies with these elders on their routes, and they're so excited to go and have a conversation every week with them. So
yeah, and that was very intentional as well. We implemented volunteer phone callers who are incredible. So we have the same group of callers every single Tuesday who call our elderly to remind them that their care packages are coming every Wednesday. So they're also acting as our translators on the phone for that specific dialect and language, so that this creates space for more volunteers who may not speak the language. You know, like even for myself, if I could call them and help them translate. But this has allowed so many people to come forward and to really raise their hands and put their bodies out there to physically help, who want to physically put themselves out there. And our elderly have been so happy to see that there's so many people in the community who have been raising their hands. I mean, countering all of the news that's been happening, you know?
Yeah, for those of you who haven't seen the bags, it's not just a little message, it's like artwork. I mean, like real legit artwork, and people writing very deep and emotional notes on there. So it's really beautiful, actually.
Beautiful.
yeah.
So I think it's question time. Christine hopping back on, or is this kind of I think we're taking some questions. Anybody have some questions out there? Let's see, Christine.
I have a question. Moonlynn and Yin, I'm wondering, what are the plans for Heart of Dinner moving things forward? This is like, I think a lot of like emergency projects are like, oh, what do we do now? And I would love to hear about like how people can support you and what the plans are for the future.
Thank you, Irene. You're so sweet.
And we love to learn about yours too.
Yeah.
So immediately, because we are very grassroots, our immediate goal is to be able to raise enough funding where we can stabilize New York a little bit. Ideally, we would love a more permanent home, because Essex Market has been so incredibly awesome and donating their space to us every Wednesday.
Very generous.
But we would love to be able to scale longer and also bring on an actual team. No one's on payroll, everyone's a volunteer, but if we can provide, you know, jobs for those in our community who would like to be a part of Heart of Dinner long term, that'd be great. We'd love to scale over to LA and also San Francisco, because, you know, all the stories there of what's been happening there, it's really heartbreaking. There's just so many goals where we're like, okay, let's take it one step at a time to situate New York. I think that's going to be the ultimate goal for the upcoming year.
Yeah. And how about you, Irene?
I mean, Project Restore Us is like its own machine now. And so they're going to keep going, I think, as long as they can. One thing that's been really interesting is finding opportunities with like the city of Boston and the state of Massachusetts to divert you know, state and city funding that normally would go to like Cisco to provide, you know, meals or groceries. And so finding ways for small businesses to get involved in that and to be able to access some of that funding, that's been really cool. But yeah, I mean, every time we do another distribution, I'm just like, wow, I can't believe this is still happening. And it's really exciting. And of course, it's also happening because there's so much food insecurity, right? Yeah. So there's like a sort of two sides to that coin. But I don't know, I hope that like, even if all of the kind of mutual aid, the formal mutual aid work sort of like dies down, I think there's so many people who have during this time like connected with someone who they never would have connected with, just like you're saying. And so that gives me a lot of hope that whatever we all do next is going to be more about building.
Yes.
Yep. 100%.
You said it beautifully, Irene. You're so eloquent.
Thank you.
You are.
We have a question from one of the listeners, Christy Lau, asking, "What are y'all doing for self-care?" So I know everyone's pretty busy.
Okay, well, first of all, I'm sorry, but I have to give a shout out to Christy Lau. This poor girl got roped into Heart of Dinner. We have no idea. She has no idea how, and since August has been there helping us keep things so streamlined and organized, along with Drew Nguyen and Joe Henning at our headquarters at Essex Market. And I truly don't know what we would do without them at the headquarters. I think I would probably lose my mind, and they've been keeping us sane
many times.
And she's also the one talking about handwritten notes. Arnold, you're asking about that, and the illustrations. I was drowning in the organizations coming in and out, along with delivery logistics and all of that. Christy came in. Not only was she starting as just an illustrator herself, a volunteer, just dropping off bags.
No one
we just like roped her in, and just it was like a black hole, and she's never coming back out. And she is the one who's been managing, handling in and out thousands of brown bags and handwritten notes since forever. So thank you so much, Christy. And she's very concerned that we haven't had self-care, hence the question. So, and I know she's concerned too for you, Irene, I'm sure. So thank you so much, Christy. We love you, and thank you for this question. We don't prioritize self-care, quite honestly. And I think that's a really important conversation to have, is a lot of people are talking about mutual aid, relief efforts work, but people do not talk about the emotional, psychological, physical toll it takes on organizers and the longtime volunteers many times. And especially if it's work that is all volunteers based. You also have to think about survival. You have to, especially during a time of pandemic, you really have to try and prioritize. And it's funny because I'm lecturing, but I'm being a hypocrite, so I need to really follow my own advice. But Irene, are you having any self-care? I feel like you're not. I don't know. I feel like your personality, you don't do
Yeah,
something.
she does a lot. She's doing a lot.
Yeah, I
at
don't know
once
if
here.
you saw the face I made when I saw that question, but you know, I think one really important thing for me is that I'm in therapy, and I have been for a very long time. And you know, a lot of what we talk about is understanding like the cultural norms from my family and the culture that we come from. But that's one thing that I have always prioritized. And you know, for folks who are maybe thinking about it but have never engaged formal mental health services, I think that there's something in it for everyone. And so if this is a time to take that leap, I really highly encourage it. And then I think that maybe this is just a very crafty excuse, but I do love the idea that like self-care is community care and community care is self-care. Because, you know, I might feel really relaxed after sitting in a bath, right, for an hour or whatever. But I don't think I'm going to sleep as well at night if I don't feel like I supported someone or did something good for someone that day. And so I think those are things that need to be in balance, and the sort of collective thinking and collective energy around that. I hope that that is what we can really come out of this with, because self-care and isolation, like, what's the point of that? We care for ourselves so that we can keep caring for our community and vice versa. So I try to think about that a lot.
1000%, echoing you on every single point you brought up. And also, I love therapy. I just haven't done it for a while, and I need to get back in it. It's very helpful. It's very healthy. And also, yes, about community care, self-care. It's a beautiful synergy right there. We just got back from the Catskills 2-night stay that her best friend gifted to us, forced us to go. And we realized, wow, we needed to do this so long ago because we didn't realize how much Heart of Dinner had been. We felt like it was a huge pressure on our shoulders, like this we were lifting. And don't forget, being in a relationship too, we work on this Monday through Sundays. We don't know when to stop. We don't know when to break. And it becomes very difficult too in a relationship where Heart of Dinner was born out of like our love story too, where it's like we realize, ooh, we need to make sure we take care of ourselves and our relationship, because that will directly impact Heart of Dinner as well, and vice versa. So I love that you brought up that stuff, Irene. Like,
Thank you,
honestly,
Irene.
we want to hang out with
Yeah.
you. Okay,
We're going to
seriously.
Boston. See you
We're
soon.
gonna go to Boston and we're gonna see you.
Heart of Dinner X May coming soon.
Yeah,
Cross
yeah.
collaboration.
And with warm welcome. We'll have to, you know,
Oh.
Oh, yes. Oh my God. So exciting. Thank you for the
Yeah.
question, Christy.
So
Thank
good.
There's a few more questions, but we only have about a minute left of this webinar, unfortunately. Any questions that weren't unanswered, I guess you can DM them to Beard Foundation, right? And I'm sure they'll address them or forward them to you guys. But is there anything you guys would like to share in the last minute for this webinar? Nothing?
Thank you so much, everybody. I'm sorry we couldn't get to your questions.
I know. Well, I mean, Christina O says, no questions, just crying here, feeling so inspired by you all. Julie's asking about what does With Warm Welcome have in the works. We just did a podcast about that, so you can go to With Warm Welcome for that one. There's some other questions, but you know, I think there's a hard time limit for this webinar. The questions just started coming in, so.
Ben, I think Debbie said if any of us are able to stay past the hour, it's okay to go over a little bit.
Okay.
Are you in that? I don't know if you're in that chat.
I do not see that chat.
Yes, we're totally down to stay as well.
Oh, so Ben, if you open up the GoToWebinar control panel, there should be a header
I
says
wasn't
chat.
sure if it was Ben who had to go. So I was like,
Yeah, like,
Ben,
Ben's like, I gotta go. I'm busy.
No, I thought it was,
Oh yeah, we're on the clock, you guys.
I don't want to go. I can stay here all night, you know?
He's like, I gotta take a bath for the self-care right now, 8 p.m. Let's go.
Doesn't mean my books tonight, you know? Let's see.
Hello.
Nina,
Sorry, I'm here to just chime in and say, yes, feel free to answer. Everyone who is on the webinar right now, all the attendees, feel free to stay if you can. We'd love to answer at least a couple more questions because we're getting such amazing and insightful questions. So
Yes, let's do it.
I will leave you all now.
Thank you all for your questions. It's so lovely. It's always so exciting.
Arnold, can you see the questions?
I can. Okay, so I'll pick up where you left off. So with Warm Welcome, what we're doing, we, you know, Irene, I just connected the dots, but for Boston, we actually decided to donate 10% of proceeds to Project Restore Us, actually, because Tracy is co-hosting it with us. So that's coming up in June, and the pre-orders for that box hasn't, it's not live yet, but you can definitely sign up for our newsletter, and you'll know just exactly when that's coming out. So. Julie, thanks for asking about with Warm Welcome and Baker's Box. And just really quickly, Baker's Box is a project that we started in March. It was actually because we wanted to celebrate Women's History Month, and we want to celebrate Asian American excellence with, you know, female pastry chefs and bakers. As we were organizing it, coincidentally and unfortunately, there was a spike in hate crimes against our community, and so we pivoted a little bit there and donated 50% of all proceeds to Apex for Youth, which is a wonderful organization that I think we're all aware of. And then we brought that to LA last month because I live in LA now. You can DM me about my real thoughts about LA. I'm happy to share that on a private channel. And then going to Chicago later this month with my brother Ben. And then we're gonna go to, I'm taking him with me everywhere. So I'm taking Ben to Boston, whether he likes it or not, in June. And then we're going to, yeah, it's gonna be a nationwide bromance tour. Yeah, and then Philly, DC, San Francisco, Portland, and Seattle. So one city a month for the rest of the year. But kind of like chiming in on that, I think for anyone listening in that want to contribute and help, I mean, we have two wonderful organizations here. And so if you're based in New York or Boston, I think that they would love to have you. If you want to volunteer your time, I think this is a really great place to start if you want to give back to the community. And obviously with Warm Welcome too, we're going to be in different cities in the coming months as well. So thanks for that question. And then here's one from Susan. How to chat and or confront folks appropriating Asian food? Do we educate? Is it our responsibility?
I can
How much energy do you have?
Yeah. I think that Debbie shared a link to the piece that I published in April, and I'll see if maybe she can post it again. But it's called 8 Totally Achievable Ways to Show Up for Racial Justice When You're White and Own an Asian
Perfect.
Restaurant. I broke it down into 8 pieces, and I tried to write it in a way that was like really patient and really listen to people. And it's because I've had this conversation so many times, right? Where it becomes like, you can't cook this. Yes, I can. No, you can't. Yes, I can. And then everyone leaves pissed off and nothing happens. And so I like really want that conversation to be productive. And so I give like a few different recommendations for like, here are some things you have to admit to yourself. And then here are some things you can actually do. And despite publishing a list of 8 things, I still had a lot of white chefs calling me, being like, Irene, what do I do? And so I was like, well, we can go through the list together. Although I have to say, like, I'm thrilled that they wanted to call me. They wanted to connect on this because I think a lot of people, when they feel that cultural appropriation conversation coming, they just run in the other direction. I was really careful not to use the phrase cultural appropriation because I think that for the vast majority of these white chefs, they do have their heart in the right place. They need to examine more the context that they're in. I always feel like if we lived in a perfectly equal society, I don't care who cooks what. But as long as Asians and Asian Americans are being targeted and are being the subjects of all kinds of messed up shit, you don't get to take our food and treat us like that. Mm-hmm. And so I think that I want to be able to bring those chefs along in the conversation with us and give them a real opportunity to show up for the AAPI community. So I really tried to take this task on. I don't think it's anyone's responsibility. I think it's white people's responsibility. But I went to prep school, and so I feel like my family invested a lot of money in making sure that I know how to talk to white people who mean well, but maybe don't know what's up. And so, you know, for me, I felt like, okay, this is a project, like this is something that I can do, that I can contribute. And like, I wanted to write this so that someone else doesn't have to. And I would say that, like, if you, in your situation, whatever it is, have the energy to engage, like, that's amazing, but it's not your job. And so please don't feel like it is. But I don't know, that's just my 2 cents on it.
Well, mic drop there. I mean, that's
I know.
great.
Man,
Perfect answer. Moving on to the next question. Okay, my friend, this is actually from my friend Kenny. It says, other than continue to do what they do with their heads down and putting their love into their food, what can Asian American restaurateurs do to push up against the cage of price points and cultural value that Asian food is and has always been in the immediate, and not just waiting until things change?
I love this question.
Just take it. I'm just like so spellbound by your answers. I'm like, yeah, go on.
I mean, I think that one thing, so right now with Commonwealth Kitchen, I'm working with a group of 8 Black and Latinx owned restaurants. And they, you know, have done pretty well through COVID. And now the goal is really to set them up to thrive. I think that so much of what consumers are looking for is that human connection and the story behind, you know, this dish or this chef or that restaurant. And so I think that one thing that young AAPI folks can do is help the restaurants tell their stories. Because, you know, to the untrained or like unfamiliar person, every restaurant in Chinatown may as well be the same. But we all know that every single person who works there, every dish on the menu has a story behind it, a story that would really like knock your socks off if you knew it. And I think that, you know, to make sure that we speak to the humanity and the value of the people who are creating the food and tell their stories, that's how we get to the point where people develop a different kind of respect for it, and become willing to maybe pay a different price point for it. And I think that the times when I've learned the backstory of like a Chinese restaurant where, like, you know, I speak like a 2nd grader's level of Chinese, and so I would never be able to make that connection myself. But if there's someone who can help me do it, then like I'm thrilled, and like I'm so excited to meet Priscilla and to know that like her scallion pancake recipe, you know, and so on and so forth. And then I feel like I'm part of the club, like I'm on the inside and I know about this restaurant, even though, you know, Priscilla would be very offended by my level of Chinese. So I think that's one of the things, storytelling and really conveying the humanity. And like, I mean, Asian immigrants have crazy backstories. Like our parents and grandparents have been through crazy shit. And so making sure that we don't erase that in an attempt to assimilate, that to me is really important. And I love seeing how many young AAPI folks, like on Instagram, are really helping to get those stories out there.
Preserving the culture, especially, and making sure that that's not lost in what's going on.
Yeah, honoring the heritage,
exactly.
For sure. Irene,
you got you. Learning so much from you. Like, yeah.
Irene, we're gonna hang out.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm so excited. I can't wait. Everyone should come. We'll do Baker's Box, and we'll just eat pastries all day.
I'm a terrible baker, but I'll eat the pastries, all right?
Yeah,
that's what I'm volunteering for.
My mouth is ready to go. Done and done. Oh, this is so wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much for this incredible conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Arnold, Ben, thank you for hosting.
Yeah. Thank you, JBN, for having us.
Yes.
Yeah.
This has been amazing.
So much.
Thank you all so much. I could listen to you all talk all night, but I know we all have lives and things to move on to. But again, thank you to everyone for joining us for this incredible panel. I was telling the group earlier before we went live, how honored I am to be able to share this space with these incredible leaders in our communities. And I hope this conversation was educational and resonated with each of you in one way or another. And a warm thank you to our speakers, our excellent moderators, and of course to our audience. Please check out our many upcoming events and webinars on openforgood.com. Our next Wednesday, we'll have our next installment of Know Your Black History, which will highlight how different groups are addressing food apartheid in their own communities. And yeah, again, thank you all so much for this incredible conversation. I am on cloud 9, honestly.
We are so honored to be invited and to be amongst this incredible group. Truly, we have so much love and respect for each and every one of you, and we cannot wait to hang out and eat and continue to ask if you've eaten yet. And thank you so much for having us. Really, thank you.
This is such a treat. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Moonlynn, Yin, and Irene. Arnold, you guys are awesome. Moonlynn, Yin, I'll see you soon. Irene, we'll see you next month.
Yes.
Awesome.
Back to New York. If you come back to New York, let's eat.
Come visit us. Yes.
All right.
Everyone.
Yeah, have a great weekend,
you.
everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.